You're exhausted because you're resisting. They told you exhaustion comes from working too hard, from lack of sleep, from stress that never ends. But if that were true, why do you still feel drained, even on quiet days? Why does your mind refuse to rest, even when your body is still? Why do you feel heavy without knowing exactly why? The truth is, your exhaustion isn't coming from life itself. It's coming from the silent fight you're having with reality every moment, wishing things were different, replaying what already happened, fearing what might come next. Your mind treats the present like a problem to solve instead of a moment to live, and that constant resistance is what's draining your energy. Buddhist teachings revealed this long ago. Suffering begins the moment we argue with what is, and peace begins the moment we stop. Tonight, as you listen, something inside you will start to unclench. The pressure in your mind will soften. The tension in your body will ease. You may feel a quiet relief, like setting down armor you've been wearing for years. And when you wake up tomorrow, life may not look different, but it will feel different. Calmer, clearer, lighter, because you're no longer fighting it. This isn't just another audio to fall asleep to. This is what happens when you finally stop resisting. Are you ready? Let's begin. Something inside you already knows this is true. The tiredness you feel did not start today. It did not come from work, from responsibilities, or from how long you slept last night. It has been building quietly, layer by layer, every time your mind returned to something that cannot be changed. Every time you replayed a moment that is already gone. Every time you argued with a past that cannot hear you. What you are about to understand is where most of your energy has really been going. The mind has a strange habit. It treats the past as if it is still happening. A conversation from years ago can still make your chest tighten. A mistake you made can still send a wave of shame through your body. A betrayal can still feel fresh, even when the people involved have moved on with their lives. The body reacts as if the danger is present now, even when the event exists only as a memory. This is not weakness, it is conditioning. The brain is designed to protect you, so it keeps scanning old experiences for threats, hoping to prevent pain from happening again. But in doing so, it unknowingly keeps you trapped inside something that is already over. Arguing with what already happened is one of the most exhausting things a human being can do, because there is no resolution. You cannot win a debate with yesterday. You cannot negotiate with a memory. You cannot rewrite a moment that has already settled into history. Yet the mind keeps trying, as if persistence alone could bend time backward. Each replay feels like an attempt to fix something, but it only deepens the fatigue. It is like running on a treadmill expecting to arrive somewhere new. Notice how the mind uses phrases like, "I should have," "I shouldn't have," "Why did that happen?" or "If only I had known." These thoughts feel productive, as if you are analyzing and learning, but most of the time they are loops, not lessons. True learning leads to clarity and release. Rumination leads to confusion and heaviness. The difference is subtle but important. One frees you, the other binds you. Buddhist teachings describe this as clinging. Not clinging to the event itself, but to the idea that the event should have been different. Suffering is not created by what happened. It is created by the refusal to let the past be exactly as it was. This refusal is often invisible because it hides inside ordinary thinking. You may not say out loud that you reject the past, but every replay, every mental argument, every attempt to mentally edit the story is a quiet form of resistance. Your body pays the price for that resistance. When the mind revisits a painful memory, the nervous system activates as if the threat is present. Stress hormones rise, muscles tighten, breathing becomes shallow. Over time, this constant activation leads to a background exhaustion that never fully disappears. You may think you are tired because of your schedule, but the deeper cause is the emotional labor of carrying unfinished mental battles. There is also a hidden fear behind this pattern. Letting go of the argument with the past can feel like admitting defeat. It can feel like saying the pain did not matter, or that the injustice was acceptable. So the mind holds on, believing that staying upset is a form of loyalty to what happened. But acceptance is not agreement. It does not mean you approve of the event. It means you stop demanding that reality be different from what it was. You stop asking life to undo something it cannot undo. Think about how much energy is required to hold tension in the body for long periods of time. Now consider how long you have been holding tension toward the past. Years, sometimes decades. No muscle could endure that without fatigue. The mind is no different. It was not designed to carry unresolved conflict forever. Another reason this pattern persists is identity. The past often becomes part of the story you tell about yourself. The person who was wronged, the one who failed, the one who missed their chance. Letting go of the argument can feel like losing a piece of who you are. So the mind keeps revisiting the story, polishing it, defending it, reinforcing it. But identity built on pain requires constant maintenance, and that maintenance drains energy every day. You might notice that the more you think about certain memories, the more solid they feel, even if they are incomplete or distorted. Memory is not a recording. It changes each time you recall it. When you revisit the past with anger or regret, you strengthen those emotions, making the memory feel even heavier the next time. It becomes a cycle where the act of remembering deepens the wound instead of healing it. There is also a quiet addiction to familiarity. Painful memories are uncomfortable, but they are known. The mind prefers known discomfort to unknown peace. Letting go creates empty space, and empty space can feel threatening because it forces you to face the present without distraction. So the mind returns to the past, not because it enjoys suffering, but because it fears the silence that would remain without it. Buddhism teaches that freedom begins when you see thoughts as events in the mind, not as commands you must obey. A memory can arise without requiring your participation. You can notice it, feel whatever emotions appear, and allow it to pass without feeding it. This is not suppression, it is non-attachment. Suppression pushes the memory down while tension remains. Non-attachment allows the memory to exist without giving it control over your state. There is a profound difference between remembering and reliving. Remembering is neutral. It acknowledges what happened. Reliving is immersive. It pulls you back into the emotional storm as if it is happening now. Most exhaustion comes from reliving, not remembering. When you stop stepping into the storm each time it appears, the energy that was consumed by that process becomes available again. Forgiveness is often misunderstood in this context. It is not about excusing behavior or pretending nothing happened. It is about releasing the grip the past has on your present energy. You forgive not because the other person deserves it, but because you deserve peace. Holding resentment is like holding a burning object, expecting the other person to feel the heat. The longer you hold it, the more damage it does to you. The same principle applies to self-forgiveness. Many people are harsher toward themselves than they would ever be toward others. They replay their mistakes with a cruelty that no external critic could match. This internal punishment feels like responsibility, but it is actually another form of resistance. You cannot punish your past self into becoming wiser. Growth comes from understanding, not from endless self-attack. Acceptance of the past does not erase consequences, but it frees you from unnecessary suffering. It allows you to respond to the present instead of reacting to ghosts. When the mind is no longer occupied with old battles, attention returns to what is happening now, and life feels lighter, not because circumstances changed, but because the weight of resistance is gone. There is a quiet peace that emerges when you stop trying to solve something that has no solution. The mind becomes less noisy. The body relaxes. You begin to notice small details you previously overlooked. The rhythm of your breathing, the feeling of your feet on the ground, the subtle sense of being alive in this moment. These are not dramatic changes, but they are signs that energy is returning to where it belongs. You may also discover that many fears about the future are extensions of unresolved past experiences. When you release the past, the future loses some of its threat because you are no longer projecting old pain onto what has not yet happened. Anxiety decreases not because you control the future, but because you are no longer haunted by yesterday. Letting go is not a single decision. It is a practice. The mind will return to old patterns, especially when triggered. Each time it does, you have another opportunity to notice the habit and gently disengage. Over time, the intervals between these loops grow longer and the intensity decreases. What once consumed hours of mental energy may shrink to a brief flicker of thought. Eventually, you realize that the past has no power on its own. Its influence comes from the attention you give it. When attention returns to the present, the past becomes quieter, like a distant echo instead of a constant noise. This is where real rest begins, not the rest that comes from sleep alone, but the rest that comes from no longer carrying unnecessary burdens. The exhaustion you have been feeling is not proof that you are broken. It is evidence that you have been fighting battles that ended long ago. When you stop fighting, the energy that was trapped in those conflicts becomes available for living, creating, connecting, and simply being here. And as that energy returns, something unexpected happens. You begin to feel a sense of space inside yourself, a calm that does not depend on circumstances, a quiet confidence that you can face whatever comes next without dragging the past behind you. This is the hidden relief that arrives when you finally stop arguing with what already happened. As the weight of the past begins to loosen, another layer of tension quietly reveals itself. Even when you stop replaying old memories, a different struggle continues in the background, a resistance not to what happened, but to what is happening right now. The exhaustion does not disappear completely because the mind is still bracing itself against reality, as if reality were something hostile. There is a deeper reason for this, and once you see it, you begin to understand why peace can feel unfamiliar at first. Something in you has been trained to treat life like a battlefield, not because you chose it, but because the human mind evolved to survive danger, not to rest in calm. Long before modern life, survival depended on detecting threats quickly and reacting before it was too late. The brain learned to scan constantly, to question everything, to assume that what is unknown could be dangerous. That ancient system is still active today, even when the threats are no longer physical. Now it turns everyday uncertainty into something that feels like an enemy. This is why acceptance can feel uncomfortable. When you stop resisting, the survival system interprets it as lowering your guard. It confuses peace with vulnerability. It sends signals that say, if you relax, something bad will happen. So the mind keeps pushing, analyzing, worrying, controlling, not because it enjoys tension, but because it believes tension equals safety. You might notice how difficult it is to simply allow things to be unresolved. A delayed message, an unclear situation, a decision that has not yet been made, the mind rushes to fill the gap. It wants closure immediately because uncertainty feels threatening. Acceptance, which means allowing uncertainty to exist without panic, feels like stepping into open space without armor. The body tightens, thoughts accelerate, and the urge to regain control becomes overwhelming. Control becomes the mind's favorite strategy for dealing with fear. If it can predict, organize, plan, and manage everything, then maybe nothing will go wrong. But reality does not follow plans perfectly. Life changes direction without asking permission. When events unfold differently than expected, the mind experiences it as a failure of control, not as a natural part of existence. It reacts with frustration, anxiety, or anger, as if reality has betrayed it. This creates a constant low-level conflict between how life is and how the mind insists it should be. That conflict is exhausting because it never truly ends. Even small inconveniences become personal battles. Traffic becomes an insult. Delays become injustices. Other people's choices feel like obstacles placed deliberately in your path. The mind takes everything personally because it sees itself as the center of the story. Buddhist teachings describe this as the illusion of control, the belief that you are supposed to shape every outcome and prevent every discomfort. When that illusion breaks, instead of recognizing it as an illusion, the mind doubles down. It tries harder. It tightens its grip. It refuses to accept that some aspects of life are simply not controllable. This refusal is what drains energy more than the situation itself. Acceptance is often misunderstood as passivity, but it is actually clarity. It means seeing what is within your influence and what is not, without wasting energy on the latter. The survival mind struggles with this distinction because it prefers certainty over truth. It would rather maintain the illusion that everything can be controlled than face the reality that some things cannot. There is also a deeper identity issue at play. Many people define themselves by their ability to manage, fix, and overcome. Control becomes part of who they believe they are. When life presents something that cannot be fixed, it feels like a threat to that identity. Accepting reality then feels like admitting weakness, even though it is actually a form of wisdom. Strength is not always pushing harder. Sometimes it is knowing when pushing creates more harm than good. The body reflects this inner battle. Chronic tension in the shoulders, jaw, and stomach often comes from the nervous system preparing for action that never arrives. It is like holding a shield up all day in case an attack happens. Eventually the muscles tire, breathing becomes shallow, and fatigue spreads through the entire system. The body is not exhausted from effort alone, it is exhausted from constant readiness. Another way the mind turns reality into an enemy is through comparison. It measures the present against an imagined version of how things should be. If reality falls short, dissatisfaction appears. Instead of appreciating what exists, attention moves to what is missing. This keeps the mind in a perpetual state of deficiency, always chasing an improved version of life that may never arrive. Acceptance interrupts this cycle by shifting focus from evaluation to observation. There is also fear of unpredictability. The mind prefers known discomfort to unknown possibility because at least known discomfort feels manageable. When life changes direction, the survival system interprets it as danger. It triggers resistance not because change is harmful, but because change is unfamiliar. Acceptance means allowing life to move without needing guarantees, and that feels risky to a mind trained to avoid risk at all costs. Over time, living in this defensive mode becomes normal. You may not even notice the constant tension because it has always been there. Calm can feel strange, almost suspicious, as if something is wrong simply because nothing is wrong. This is why some people feel uneasy when life is peaceful. Their nervous system is conditioned to expect problems. The turning point comes when you realize that the survival mechanism is outdated in many situations. It was designed for immediate physical threats, not for emails, social interactions, or future plans. Yet it reacts to these modern stresses with the same intensity. Understanding this allows you to step back and question the urgency your mind creates. Not every discomfort is a crisis. Not every uncertainty requires action. Acceptance does not remove responsibility. You still act where action is needed. The difference is that action comes from clarity instead of fear. When you are not fighting reality, you can see more clearly what actually matters. Decisions become simpler because they are no longer clouded by the need to control every variable. There is also a quiet trust that develops. Not trust that everything will go your way, but trust that you can handle whatever comes. This trust reduces the need for constant vigilance. The nervous system begins to relax because it no longer believes survival depends on perpetual tension. As this shift happens, energy that was tied up in resistance becomes available for presence. You start to experience moments fully instead of evaluating them. Conversations feel lighter because you are not trying to steer them toward a specific outcome. Work feels less draining because you are focused on the task itself instead of worrying about every possible result. The mind may still attempt to regain control, especially during stress, but you begin to recognize the pattern sooner. Instead of being pulled into the battle, you can pause and return to the present. This pause is powerful. It interrupts the automatic reaction and creates space for a different response. Gradually, reality stops feeling like something to defeat and starts feeling like something to participate in. Life becomes less of a struggle and more of a flow. Challenges still exist, but they are approached with flexibility rather than resistance. There is a sense of moving with events instead of pushing against them. This does not mean you become indifferent. It means you become responsive instead of reactive. You engage with life from a place of steadiness rather than urgency. The exhaustion that came from constant opposition begins to fade because you are no longer wasting energy on battles that cannot be won. What remains is a quieter kind of strength. Not the tense strength of someone bracing for impact, but the grounded strength of someone who knows they do not have to fight everything that arises. Reality is no longer an enemy. It is simply the field in which your life unfolds. And as this understanding settles in, a new possibility appears. The possibility of living without the constant need to defend yourself from existence itself. That is where true rest begins, not as an escape from life, but as a way of being fully here without resistance. When you stop treating reality like an enemy, a different question begins to surface. If life itself is no longer the thing draining you, then what is? Why does the exhaustion remain even when you are no longer fighting the present moment in the same way? The answer is quieter, more personal, and harder to admit. Sometimes the body is not tired from what you are doing, but from what you are not allowing yourself to acknowledge. There is a kind of fatigue that sleep does not fix. It lingers even after rest, even after a calm day, even when nothing demanding has happened. It feels heavy, dull, and strangely emotional at the same time. This is not simply physical tiredness. It is the body's way of signaling that something inside you is out of alignment. The life you are living on the outside does not fully match what you know on the inside. And maintaining that gap requires constant energy. Every person carries an inner knowing, a quiet sense of what feels true and what does not. It shows up as subtle discomfort when you say yes but want to say no, when you stay where you no longer belong, when you pretend to be fine while something inside you is asking for change. Ignoring that inner signal does not silence it. It pushes the tension into the body. Muscles tighten. Breathing becomes shallow, posture collapses, and energy drops because the body is holding something that the mind refuses to face. Living in misalignment is like driving with the brakes slightly pressed. The car still moves, but the effort required is much greater than it should be. Over time, the system overheats. You may continue functioning, but everything feels heavier than it needs to be. Tasks that should be simple feel overwhelming because part of your energy is constantly being used to maintain the illusion that everything is fine. This often happens in environments where you cannot be fully yourself. a job that contradicts your values, relationships where you suppress your thoughts, roles you accepted out of obligation rather than choice. Each day spent performing a version of yourself that does not feel authentic adds another layer of exhaustion. The body senses the tension between who you are and who you are pretending to be, and it protests by slowing you down. Fatigue becomes a message rather than a malfunction. It is the body saying, something is not right, and I cannot keep carrying this without acknowledgement. Many people try to override this message with caffeine, distractions, or pushing themselves harder, believing that productivity will solve the problem. But pushing through misalignment only deepens the disconnect. It is like turning up the volume on music to drown out a warning alarm instead of addressing what triggered it. There is also emotional truth that goes unlived. Feelings that were never expressed, grief that was never processed, anger that was never allowed to exist. These emotions do not disappear just because they were ignored. They settle into the nervous system, creating a background tension that consumes energy. The effort required to keep them suppressed is constant, even if you are not consciously aware of it. Buddhist teachings emphasize the importance of acknowledging reality as it is, including internal reality. When you deny what you feel or what you know, you create resistance not only to external life but to your own experience. This inner resistance is particularly draining because it splits your attention. One part of you is trying to maintain normalcy while another part is quietly asking to be heard. There is also the fatigue of living by expectations that were never truly yours. Many people follow paths chosen by family, culture, or fear rather than personal conviction. They achieve milestones that look successful from the outside but feel empty on the inside. The energy required to maintain motivation for something that does not resonate with you is enormous. Without genuine connection to what you are doing, effort feels mechanical instead of meaningful. Your body recognizes meaning even when your mind ignores it. When actions align with purpose, energy tends to increase despite effort. When actions contradict purpose, energy decreases despite rest. This is why you can spend hours on something you care about and feel alive, yet feel drained after a short time doing something that feels meaningless. The difference is not the activity itself, but the alignment behind it. There is also fear of change that keeps people in situations they have outgrown. The unknown feels risky, so staying in familiar discomfort seems safer. But the body senses stagnation. It responds with heaviness, lack of motivation, and low vitality because growth is being suppressed. Life has a natural tendency toward movement and evolution. When you resist that movement, tension builds. Another layer of this exhaustion comes from unspoken boundaries. Saying yes when you want to say no, tolerating behavior that drains you, allowing responsibilities that exceed your capacity. Each time you override your limits, you send a message to your body that your needs are secondary. Over time, the body stops cooperating fully. Energy decreases because it no longer trusts that you will protect it from overload. There is also the silent cost of self-betrayal. When you act against your values to avoid conflict or rejection, something inside you withdraws, confidence weakens, motivation fades, and fatigue increases because maintaining self-respect requires honesty. Without it, even success feels hollow because it was achieved at the expense of authenticity. The body does not speak in words, but it communicates through sensations. Tightness in the chest, heaviness in the limbs, persistent tiredness, lack of enthusiasm. These signals are often interpreted as problems to eliminate rather than messages to understand. When you listen instead of suppressing them, you may discover that they point toward changes you have been postponing. There is also a difference between rest and avoidance. True rest restores energy because it allows integration. Avoidance temporarily numbs discomfort, but leaves the underlying misalignment untouched. You can rest all day and still feel tired if the real issue is not physical exertion, but emotional or existential tension. Facing unlived truth requires courage, because it may lead to decisions that disrupt comfort. Admitting that a relationship no longer works, that a career path feels wrong, that a part of you has been neglected for years. These realizations can be unsettling, but they also release energy that was trapped in denial. Clarity, even when difficult, is less exhausting than confusion. Honesty with yourself reduces internal friction. When you acknowledge what you truly want, what you truly feel, and what you truly need, the body begins to relax because it no longer has to carry the burden of concealment. Alignment does not guarantee ease, but it removes the unnecessary effort of pretending. There is also a deeper level of truth that relates to purpose. Not a grand mission, but a sense that your life direction resonates with who you are becoming. Without this resonance, even ordinary tasks can feel heavy because they lack context. When actions connect to a meaningful direction, energy flows more naturally. The process of realignment often begins with small adjustments rather than dramatic changes. Speaking honestly in one conversation, setting one boundary, making one decision that reflects your values instead of fear. Each step reduces the gap between inner knowing and outer life. As that gap closes, fatigue decreases because the body is no longer compensating for contradiction. You may also notice that clarity brings unexpected relief. Even when the truth is difficult, there is comfort in no longer pretending. The nervous system settles because uncertainty is replaced by direction. Energy returns not because circumstances improved instantly, but because the internal struggle has eased. Over time, living in alignment creates resilience. Challenges still arise, but they do not drain you in the same way because you are not simultaneously fighting yourself. Effort feels purposeful instead of forced. Rest feels restorative instead of insufficient. The body cooperates because it senses coherence between thought, emotion, and action. This is why some people appear energized despite demanding lives, while others feel depleted despite minimal responsibilities. The difference is not only external workload, but internal alignment. When your life reflects your truth, energy circulates. When it contradicts your truth, energy stagnates. Exhaustion, then, is not always a problem to fix, but a signal to interpret. It invites you to ask where you have been silent when you needed to speak, compliant when you needed to stand firm, passive when you needed to choose. It points toward parts of your life that are waiting for honesty. As you begin to listen, the relationship with your body changes. Instead of seeing fatigue as an enemy, you see it as guidance. It directs you toward what needs attention, adjustment, or release. The body becomes an ally rather than an obstacle. And when alignment gradually replaces resistance, a different kind of vitality emerges. Not frantic energy, but steady strength. A sense that you are moving in the right direction even if the path is uncertain. The exhaustion that once felt mysterious starts to make sense because you understand what it was trying to tell you. This is the quiet restoration that happens when you stop living against your own truth. Not by forcing yourself into a new identity, but by allowing who you already are to shape the way you live. Energy returns because nothing inside you is being held back anymore. As you begin to live closer to your own truth, another source of hidden exhaustion becomes easier to notice. Even when you are no longer replaying the past, even when you stop betraying what you feel inside, there can still be a quiet tension running underneath the day. It shows up in small sighs, in impatience, in the sense that something is slightly off, even when nothing is obviously wrong. This is the fatigue of wishing the present moment were different. There is a subtle habit in the human mind that rarely gets questioned. It constantly edits reality in real time. It compares what is happening with what it believes should be happening instead. The room should be quieter. The weather should be better. People should behave differently. You should feel more motivated, more confident, more certain. These thoughts appear so quickly that they feel automatic, almost invisible. Yet each one creates a tiny friction between you and the moment you are actually living. This friction consumes energy because it divides your attention. Part of your mind is dealing with reality, while another part is resisting it. It is like trying to walk forward while someone is gently pulling you backward at the same time. The movement continues, but the effort required is much greater than necessary. Subtle dissatisfaction rarely feels dramatic. It does not always look like anger or despair. More often it appears as restlessness, boredom, or the constant urge to check something new. The mind looks for stimulation, not because the moment is empty, but because it refuses to settle into what already exists. It treats the present as a waiting room instead of a place where life is actually happening. This constant scanning for a better version of now drains cognitive resources. The brain uses energy to maintain focus, regulate emotions, and process information. When part of that capacity is occupied by dissatisfaction, less energy remains for clarity, creativity, and calm. Tasks feel harder not because they are difficult, but because your attention is fragmented. Buddhist teachings describe this as craving, not only craving for objects or achievements, but craving for a different experience than the one unfolding. It is the belief that fulfillment exists somewhere else, later elsewhere, after conditions change. As long as this belief persists, the present moment feels insufficient. Life becomes a series of transitions instead of a place you can fully inhabit. Notice how often thoughts begin with, "I'll feel better when." When the project is finished, when the weekend arrives, when someone responds, when circumstances improve. This pattern postpones contentment indefinitely. Even when one condition is met, the mind quickly moves to the next requirement. Satisfaction becomes temporary because it depends on outcomes rather than presence. There is also the habit of micro-judgment, evaluating everything as good or bad, useful or pointless, pleasant or annoying. While evaluation can be practical in certain situations, constant judgment creates tension. It turns simple experiences into mental debates. Instead of just hearing a sound, you decide whether it should exist. Instead of simply noticing a delay, you interpret it as an inconvenience. Each judgment tightens resistance. The body reflects this tension. Small contractions in the muscles, shallow breathing, subtle agitation in the nervous system. These reactions are so mild that they often go unnoticed, yet they accumulate throughout the day. By evening, the body feels tired, even if physical activity was minimal, because it has been in a low-level defensive state for hours. Another aspect of this exhaustion is the pressure to optimize every moment. The belief that time must always be used productively or meaningfully. When the present does not meet that expectation, guilt or anxiety appears. Relaxation becomes difficult because the mind insists there must be something more important to do. This prevents genuine rest, turning even downtime into a form of effort. Technology amplifies this pattern. Constant exposure to curated images of other people's lives creates the impression that something better is always happening somewhere else. Your current experience feels inadequate in comparison, even if it is objectively peaceful. The mind becomes conditioned to seek novelty instead of depth, stimulation instead of stillness. There is also the fear of missing out, which keeps attention scattered. If you fully commit to what is in front of you, you must accept that you are not somewhere else. The mind resists this exclusivity. It wants multiple possibilities open at once, which prevents immersion in any single experience. This fragmentation is mentally exhausting because it requires constant switching of focus. Dissatisfaction also affects relationships. When you are mentally negotiating with the present, you are not fully available to the people around you. Conversations become partial. Listening becomes selective. Others sense the absence, even if they cannot name it. This creates distance, which then becomes another source of discomfort, reinforcing the cycle. There is a misconception that wanting things to be different is necessary for progress. While improvement requires intention, constant discontent is not the same as purposeful change. Change can come from clarity and vision rather than frustration. In fact, excessive dissatisfaction often clouds judgment, making decisions reactive instead of thoughtful. Acceptance of the present does not eliminate desire or ambition. It simply removes the emotional resistance that makes the journey heavier. When you are not fighting the current moment, you can act more effectively because your energy is not divided. Effort becomes focused instead of strained. A useful shift is learning to observe discomfort without immediately trying to escape it, noticing boredom without reaching for distraction, feeling impatience without forcing resolution, allowing silence without filling it. These small practices train the mind to coexist with the present instead of constantly modifying it. Over time, this reduces the background noise in your thoughts. Moments begin to feel fuller, not because they changed, but because you are finally present for them. Simple activities regain depth. Eating, walking, resting, talking, experiences that once felt routine become vivid because your attention is no longer elsewhere. There is also a sense of relief that comes from dropping the internal demand that life must always be exciting or meaningful. Ordinary moments stop feeling like obstacles and start feeling like the fabric of life itself. This shift reduces pressure, allowing the nervous system to relax. You may also notice that creativity increases when dissatisfaction decreases. A calm mind has more capacity for insight because it is not preoccupied with complaints. Solutions appear more easily when resistance fades. This is why some of the most profound ideas arise during quiet moments rather than during frantic activity. Gratitude naturally emerges from this state, not as a forced exercise, but as a recognition of what is already here. When you are not focused on what is missing, you become aware of what is present. This awareness brings a sense of sufficiency that reduces the urge to chase constant improvement. There is also a deeper freedom in realizing that peace is not dependent on perfect conditions. Waiting for the ideal moment to feel calm is another form of resistance. Peace becomes available when you stop postponing it. It is less about achieving a state and more about allowing the absence of struggle. This does not mean every moment will feel pleasant. Acceptance includes discomfort without adding extra layers of resistance. Pain without mental argument is still pain, but it is not amplified by frustration. Difficult situations become manageable because you are not simultaneously fighting reality. As this practice deepens, time itself feels different. Days no longer blur together in a rush toward the future. Each moment stands on its own, complete rather than transitional. Life feels longer not because more time exists, but because you are actually living the time you have. The exhaustion that once felt mysterious begins to dissolve because the constant internal negotiation has stopped. You are no longer spending energy wishing the present away. Instead, you are using that energy to engage with what is here. This shift may seem small, almost insignificant, but its impact is profound. When subtle dissatisfaction disappears, a quiet contentment takes its place. Not excitement, not dramatic happiness, but a steady sense that this moment is enough. And from that sense of enoughness, energy naturally returns. Not forced energy driven by pressure, but organic vitality that comes from being aligned with the flow of life rather than pushing against it. Even as you begin to settle into the present and release the quiet habit of wishing this moment were different, there is another place the mind escapes to when it cannot control now. It travels backward, but not to replay what happened. It travels to construct versions of what could have happened. Versions where one decision changed everything. Versions where the right words were spoken, the right path was chosen, the right opportunity was taken. These invisible lives feel so close that they almost hurt. The mind has a powerful ability to simulate reality. It can build entire alternate stories from a single memory, adjusting small details until a completely different life appears. In these imagined timelines, mistakes are corrected, relationships unfold perfectly, success arrives sooner, pain never enters. The contrast between these imagined outcomes and actual life creates a quiet sorrow that is difficult to explain because nothing tangible is missing, yet something feels lost. This attachment to alternate timelines drains energy because the mind is constantly comparing what exists with what never existed. It creates a sense of deficiency that no real achievement can satisfy. Even when life improves, the imagined version remains slightly better, slightly smoother, slightly more fulfilling. Satisfaction becomes impossible because the comparison is against a fantasy designed to be ideal. Regret often fuels this pattern. Regret is not simply remembering a mistake. It is the belief that the mistake permanently destroyed a better future. The mind returns to the moment repeatedly, searching for a way to undo it, as if enough analysis could reverse time. This creates a loop where the past is not only remembered, but reshaped into a turning point that defines everything that followed. Buddhist teachings describe this as attachment to illusion. The alternate timeline feels real because the emotional response to it is real, but the scenario itself has no substance. Clinging to it creates suffering because it pulls attention away from the only timeline that exists. Life becomes overshadowed by a ghost story of what might have been. There is also a subtle arrogance hidden in this habit. The belief that you could have predicted outcomes perfectly if only you had chosen differently. In reality, every decision is made with limited information. You cannot know how the alternate path would have unfolded. It might have led to challenges just as complex, just as painful, just as unexpected. The mind edits these possibilities out, keeping only the imagined benefits while ignoring potential difficulties. Attachment to alternate timelines also creates hesitation in the present. Fear of repeating past mistakes makes decision-making heavier. You may delay action because you are trying to guarantee a perfect outcome, something that is impossible. This paralysis drains energy because the mind is constantly calculating instead of engaging. There is also the illusion that happiness exists in a specific version of life that you narrowly missed. This belief keeps you from recognizing opportunities that exist now because they do not match the imagined script. You become blind to the potential in your current circumstances because you are measuring them against a fictional standard. Relationships can be affected by this pattern as well. You may compare a current partner to someone from the past or to an imagined ideal. You may wonder how life would feel if you had stayed, left earlier, spoken differently. This comparison prevents full connection because part of your attention is invested in someone who exists only in memory or imagination. Career paths often trigger similar thoughts. Questions about whether a different field, location, or risk would have led to greater success. While reflection can be useful for growth, obsession traps you in evaluation instead of progress. Energy that could be used to build something new is spent analyzing something that cannot be changed. The brain is wired to search for patterns and meaning, so it tries to make sense of outcomes by tracing them back to decisions. This can create the illusion that life is a linear chain of cause and effect, where one choice determines everything. In reality, countless variables shape each moment, focusing on a single decision as the turning point oversimplifies a complex system and intensifies regret unnecessarily. There is also the emotional comfort of staying in the story of what could have been. As painful as it is, it provides a sense of continuity. Letting go means accepting that the imagined life will never exist, and that can feel like a second loss. Grieving something that never happened is a strange experience because there is no tangible object to mourn, yet the feeling of absence is real. Another layer of exhaustion comes from identity built around missed potential. Seeing yourself as someone who almost succeeded, almost found love, almost lived fully. This narrative can become a quiet prison because it defines you by absence rather than presence. It keeps attention on what is lacking instead of what is available. Social comparison intensifies this attachment. Seeing others achieve milestones that align with your imagined timeline reinforces the belief that you are behind. It ignores the uniqueness of each life path and reduces existence to a race with invisible checkpoints. The pressure to catch up adds urgency to an already heavy emotional load. There is also fear that letting go of the alternate timeline means settling for less. Acceptance is mistaken for resignation. In truth, releasing attachment frees energy to create new possibilities instead of mourning lost ones. It shifts focus from what cannot be reclaimed to what can still be shaped. Mindfulness practices address this by grounding attention in immediate experience. Sensations, sounds, breath, physical surroundings. These anchors bring you back to the only place where life is happening. The imagined timeline loses intensity when you stop feeding it with attention. There is a quiet strength in acknowledging that life unfolds through uncertainty. You could not have guaranteed a better outcome because the future is not a controlled experiment. Accepting this reduces the burden of responsibility for things beyond your influence. Over time, you may discover that some aspects of your current life exist precisely because of the decisions you regret. Relationships formed, skills developed, perspectives gained. The alternate timeline, while appealing, would have erased these elements. This realization softens the sharpness of regret and replaces it with curiosity about how events interconnected. There is also beauty in unpredictability. The fact that life did not follow a perfect script means it remains open. Surprises, encounters, opportunities that could not have been planned become possible. Attachment to a fixed storyline prevents you from appreciating this openness. Compassion toward yourself plays a crucial role here. Recognizing that you made decisions with the knowledge and emotional capacity you had at the time. Blame loses intensity when you see your past self as someone doing the best they could under specific circumstances rather than as someone who ruined everything. Forgiveness becomes relevant again, not as a moral gesture but as a practical release. Holding on to alternate timelines keeps wounds active. Forgiving yourself allows those wounds to close, freeing energy that was tied up in self-judgment. The mind may still revisit imagined scenarios occasionally, especially during quiet moments. The difference is that you no longer follow the story to its emotional conclusion. You notice it, acknowledge it, and return to the present without engaging. This reduces its power gradually. As attachment loosens, gratitude for what exists begins to grow naturally. Not forced positivity, but genuine appreciation for experiences that were once overlooked because they did not match the imagined ideal. Life feels less like a consolation prize and more like a unique journey that could not have been replicated. Creativity often emerges from this state because attention is no longer trapped in comparison. You can explore possibilities without the pressure of correcting the past. New directions appear that were invisible before because your gaze was fixed backward. Energy returns in subtle ways, motivation increases, curiosity replaces rumination, and the sense of being stuck fades. You start to feel capable of shaping your future rather than haunted by your past. The timeline you are living in regains significance because it is no longer overshadowed by hypothetical alternatives. Peace arrives not as a dramatic revelation, but as the absence of constant mental travel. You are here, not elsewhere. The simplicity of this realization reduces tension more than any complex strategy could. Life begins to feel lighter because you are no longer carrying invisible versions of yourself and wondering why you cannot become them. You are simply yourself, moving forward in the only direction that exists. And in that forward movement, a quiet freedom appears. The freedom from needing life to match an imagined script. The freedom to participate fully in the story that is actually unfolding. The freedom to rest in the understanding that nothing real was lost. Only possibilities that were never meant to be lived. As the pull of imagined lives begins to loosen and attention returns to the path you are actually walking, something else becomes easier to feel. Not in your thoughts, but in your body. A tightness that never fully leaves. A background alertness that makes true rest feel distant. Even when nothing is wrong, the body behaves as if something is about to happen. This is where the hidden cost of resistance becomes physical. There is a state many people live in without realizing it. It is not full panic, not obvious fear, but a constant low-grade readiness. The shoulders remain slightly tense. The jaw rarely unclenches. Breathing stays shallow instead of deep. Sleep feels light, easily interrupted. The body is not in danger, yet it is not fully at ease either. This is what happens when inner opposition becomes chronic. The nervous system stops believing that it is safe to relax. The human nervous system is designed to respond quickly to threats and return to calm once the danger passes. In earlier times, this system protected survival during immediate physical risks. After the threat ended, the body released tension and restored balance, but modern stress is rarely short-lived. Psychological resistance, fighting circumstances, suppressing emotions, holding tension toward reality, keeps the threat response active even when no physical danger exists. When the mind constantly signals that something is wrong, the body listens. Stress hormones circulate longer than necessary. The heart rate stays slightly elevated. Digestion slows because the body prioritizes readiness over restoration. Over time, this creates exhaustion that feels deeper than ordinary tiredness because the system has not experienced genuine recovery. Inner opposition sends mixed signals. One part of you is trying to function normally, while another part is rejecting what is happening. This conflict prevents the nervous system from settling. It is like pressing the accelerator and the brake at the same time. Movement continues, but the strain increases with every moment. There are many subtle forms of inner opposition, pretending to be calm while feeling overwhelmed, forcing positivity while carrying unresolved fear, staying in environments that feel unsafe emotionally while telling yourself everything is fine. Each contradiction between internal truth and external behavior confuses the body. It cannot determine whether it should relax or prepare for danger, so it remains in a state of vigilance. Chronic vigilance depletes energy because it requires continuous monitoring of surroundings and internal states. The brain scans for problems, anticipating what could go wrong next. This anticipation itself becomes a source of stress. You may feel tense before anything actually happens because the body is preparing for possibilities rather than responding to realities. Over time, this pattern can lead to what feels like collapse. Motivation fades. Concentration weakens. Tasks that once felt manageable become overwhelming. This is not laziness or lack of discipline. It is the nervous system signaling that it has been under strain for too long without relief.